mode.
Welcome, everybody. I hope we have a lot of people online today. My name is Dan Powers from Champion Solutions Group. Also, we have on the line Adam Callan from IBM. Adam will be driving our demo today for Mod 360 Enterprise Mobility Management. And we have a couple slides to go forth in the beginning, which I'm unfortunately, but you can bear with me as I go through these slides. We'll let Adam take control of the demo itself. So even though we're focusing in on mobility today, here at Champion Solutions Group, we always try to look at the big picture. So when we look at mobility, we want to have in the back of our mind, how does your mobility practice or your methodology fit inside the big picture of your environment? So again, the mobility is going to be a strong sense of what you're trying to accomplish for productivity and enabling user access. But while we do that, while we come up with your mobility strategy, we want to look at the activity that these users are going to be doing inside of your environment to be able to provide them with the productivity while maintaining our security policy. So always inside the back of your head, we want to understand that mobility is fitting into the big picture of how you do business today. So if we forward off a little bit and zero in on mobility, Adam, you can jump to the next slide here. We can see that within this big picture, we have the mobility platform. And I put up there EMM, so most people think of mobility as an MDM, which is not technically incorrect, but the original MDM was really management of devices. And in today's world, our smartphones have gotten smarter, more intelligent, more capable of doing things. So an EMM platform is really the ability to not only manage your device, but to go beyond that. For example, your applications, how your users are integrating or activating applications in your environment, whether those are in-house applications or something you buy from the App Store. We also have inside the applications the idea of content. How am I accessing content in your organization? Most folks have obviously their email, their calendars, devices, and contact lists, but above and beyond that could also be applications and content as far as what's back inside of your network, maybe on your SharePoint server and so forth. How do I make sure that I can give productivity to my end users while also maintaining some type of security? And as we get into content, again, mobility is great for adding to our productivity, but on the same side of that is how do I sync that in? It's usually not my primary device. So while mobility is strategic for your business and it makes a better user end experience, 90% of the folks still have a main device that they're going to use, probably their corporate desktop or laptop, and how do I make that data sync up? If I make an edit on my mobile device in some PDF file, for example, how does that synchronize with the other folks that I'm collaborating with? How does that synchronize back to my primary device? The unfortunate that is while we're getting a much better user end experience, we do have an innate risk with using mobility in our environment. A couple of the quick things there is malware for these devices. They're easier to lose. They're easier to be stolen. And if I have that idea of having corporate sensitive data on it, how do I make sure I secure some of these things? So these are some of the challenges you have while on one hand I have productivity with my mobile environment and enabling my workforce, I also have to be aware that the risks that come with enabling my mobile community. So as we move forward into the next slide, we understand why is this different. Well, mobility mixes personal and work. So the great example of that is BYOD. And one of the first things that folks should understand while they implement or are implementing their mobile strategy is to have a well-documented solution for how you're going to deal with BYOD. Bring your own device. So very rarely does someone start a new job, for example, and bring in their own servers, right? You're going to use the company equipment. With the mobility side of things, we're starting to mix business and personal work on the same device. We have to have a way to make sure that we can separate those two environments on a single device. The other idea of that, if we think back to our original picture where we had that circle which showed all our internal resources, is the mobility world mostly lives outside of our current perimeter. These are the people that are on the go, whether that's a FedEx guy dropping off packages and uses his mobile device to check that the package was delivered, or somebody simply reading email while they're on the road. These devices are enabling us to work outside of our current network. Also from the mobility side, it's a very fast-paced and multi-platform environment. So years ago, it might have been the BlackBerry, which dominated the corporate environment, but that turns around now into the iPhone, the Androids, and so forth, the Windows Phone. So constantly an evolving technology. On the internal side, we have the idea of the CISO, or it could be your management or a line of business. And the bottom line, I'm not going to read all the things here, but the bottom line is they're looking to maximize productivity. Otherwise, why even invest in a mobile solution? But on the flip side of that, your CISO, your security folks, are saying, hey, this is great making people productive, but we got to make sure that our data is encrypted. We got to make sure we maintain who has control of some of this data and so forth. So their idea is totally around security while we maximize our productivity to the end user. So it's a balancing act that we want to do. And as Adam goes through the demo, he can show you how Mass 360 can help you enable both sides of that coin. So again, from the IBM mobile security framework, it goes above and beyond just managing your devices. But again, protecting devices is step one in this, automatically enforcing policies, how you define your BYOD, a jailbroken device, and so forth. But it moves above and beyond that, so that not just that, but the applications themselves that run on these devices. What applications are allowed to run, which applications are allowed to contact your internal network. The same idea with the content capability. Which type of content are you enabling on these mobile devices? Who's allowed to open up certain content? Can I copy and paste this content between my secure browser or my secure email and maybe my Gmail account? These are type of concerns that you should be looking at while you're walking down your mobility environment. And of course, on the other end of that is you're managing the access and fraud. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in the cyber community, and that should be on the top of your list. Also, above and beyond mobility, if we look at the extended security intelligence, IBM has a whole concept of mobility first, which also integrates your mobility environment into your security portfolio. For example, application scanning or your SIM environment to make sure that you're monitoring your mobile access everywhere in your organization to look for anomalies and vulnerabilities. We can go to the next slide, Adam. So here we have, again, from a complete picture, as we understand it from the IBM world, is we need that secure productivity suite. It's a trusted workspace that is dedicated for the business side of your mobile environment, so I can separate my business side from my personal side. We need to be able to share documents and content and have collaboration between our mobile users and even probably my primary device. How do I do that? How do I make sure that that documentation is secured? One of the ways to do that with the Mod 360 product is the Mobile Enterprise Gateway. So again, the concept there, if we think about it, is if I can enable on my mobile device VPN into my corporate resources, which now opens up my entire mobile device into the corporate resources, or do I want to make sure that if I'm just trying to do a secure intranet browser, for example, that all I'm opening up from my mobile device, which has a mix of business and personal, that I'm only opening up connection from my secure browser into my corporate resources. And that goes along with email capabilities and applications as well. So we very much want to limit how we access that internal corporate data from our mobile devices. And again, this is where Adam can probably speak a little bit more than I can. Mod 360 is the only solution that actually has a built-in mobile threat management and malware protection system inside of their EMM, Enterprise Mobile Management. And again, of course, the basic device and control. You can't manage what you can't see. So from your mobile environment, who is accessing our network, who is authorized to do so, I need to be able to pull all that data up and see it from a single screen. Next screen. So as we talked about that secure trusted workspace, and Adam, jump in here if you want to add anything at all, but again, that idea of BYOD, I'm bringing my own device, my smartphone, whether that's an Android device, a Windows phone, an Apple phone, doesn't really matter, but how do I secure my content information? How do I secure my personal data from my business data? And that's what everything is about, that trusted workspace. Again, from the IBM Mod 360, this works across your devices. Again, whether it's a Windows phone, an Android phone, iOS devices, or whatever. And it also gives them the native experience, which is kind of unique to the product, so they don't have to relearn a new email or contact system or so forth. The same email will look very similar to an iPhone user, to what they're used to. And if you're an Android user, your email and your contact system inside the secure container will look like the native capabilities of the phone itself. For file sync and edit sharing, the system also supports not only just going through that mobile gateway we talked about to make secure connections back to your intranet and your internal resources, but if you wanted to support things like Google Dropbox, IBM, and other collaborative containers, you have that ability to enforce policies, enable your end users to do that as well. So again, we're trying to walk that fine line to make sure we're following our policies for security while also giving productivity to our end users is really our end goal here. Next slide.
Yeah, and Dan, if you don't mind, just want to jump in here.
Oh, go ahead.
The container is, you know, it's twofold, right? So on the corporate side, you know, it's really just about security and productivity, right? Let's enable all the end users to carry around with them all the tools and resources they need to be efficient on a day-to-day basis. It's one spot, you know, calendar, email, contacts, apps, docs, keeps everything nice and concise for them. So obviously it plays well there, and keep that in mind as we get into the portal. Anything and everything that you push down from the Mass 360 portal to your devices is housed in that corporate container, whether it's a corporate device or BYOD. So again, put that in your back pocket for now, but think about the BYOD side. You know, the containerized approach is all but a necessity, because what happens when somebody's connecting to the network, they have precious, you know, enterprise data, emails, projections, trends, whatever the case is, then they go rogue, they quit, they get fired, they, God forbid, they lose their device, it gets stolen. How do you protect your sensitive data? So, you know, let's let that set the table for when we jump in. But in a nutshell, the secure productivity suite, or the container itself, is really just that marriage or that blend of both security and productivity.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam.
Oh, no sweat.
So again, as we roll this out for scalability purposes, Mod 360 does offer you that capability to what we might call multi-tenant. It's easy to roll out, for example, in a pilot phase using your corporate system, corporate users and the BYOD devices, making sure you nail down what your policy is. Also being able to support multiple security policies based on the actual devices and the departments themselves. And as you can see, as we start moving over to the right side of this, is you're able to have a global corporate policy dictated at the top for certain things like, hey, is the device jailbroken, is it rooted in the case of an Android device, and so forth, and be able to take action on it. But as you filter down to maybe marketing, sales, operations, you can also deviate or give out control to these different organizations, so that marketing, for example, might want to be able to enable an application just for the marketing folks, but not for the sales folks, or give them certain data that maybe the operations folks need, but no one else in the tiers need. So that idea of being able to create in Mod 360 your enterprise mobile management, the capability of separating your organizations while still adhering to a global security policy and giving flexibility down to your end users or your lines of business, if you will. That is totally supported in the Mod 360 product. And now Adam's going to run over into his demo. Also, I should have said that first. If folks do have questions, the lines are muted. However, if anybody wants to type something in the chat window, we will go over some of the questions after and try to answer your questions as best we can.
Dan, I appreciate the you running through the slides there and setting the table for the walkthrough here. I'm hoping everybody can see red, green, and blue tiles by this point. No,
I can, Adam.
Okay, great. So, you know, folks, keep in mind, in a more of a one-off scenario, we would be a lot more conversational, right? Bouncing ideas off each other, getting to know your specific environment, and then customizing the demo to that layout. Now, obviously, in a webinar setting, it doesn't fly like that. So I'll give a very general overview here, you know, 20, 25 minutes. I'll try and hit, you know, the four corners of the portal, and then to Dan's point, you know, we will have a Q&A session at the end where we can dive into more specifics. So this is the Mass 360 home screen. This is what you would see each and every time you log in. And I think before we dive in here, I think it's important to discuss deployment, what to expect there. You know, Dan, you mentioned kind of how easy it is to roll out. It's actually something that we're praised for year over year via Gartner. Ease of use, ease of deployment. And just to sum it up, typically takes just a few minutes per device. It takes just a few minutes to build a policy, and then mere seconds to push that down to the device, right? So put it this way, in the 3 weeks after IBM acquired us back in December of 2013, in the following 3 weeks, they were able to enroll 70,000 devices. So without knowing, the device counts of the groups that are on the line today, rest assured that the vast majority of our clients, 80%, have been fully deployed in less than 6 hours. So this is not a project that's going to take you days, weeks, months. In fact, with our best-in-class support, it typically only takes you just a few hours. So that said, this is what you would see each and every time you log into your portal. We'll start with the Alert Center. Being best-in-class cloud, EMM suite, listen, everything's customizable. We're limitlessly scalable. You can move this around, make it your own, right? Obviously, green is good, red is bad, and blue is just some of the basic information we report on. If you saw something here that was concerning, all you'd have to do is click on the tile here, and it'll bring you to those devices. So in this case, these two devices are having issues with battery condition, right? So easy enough. The best part is, and again, just in speaking with our clients, fully customizable, right? So if you don't see a tile initially that you like, chances are it's in our drop down. If not, all you have to do is hit the alert here, and you can add a custom alert. So, fast forward a month, 6 months, 12 months, whenever this is rolled out, whenever the time is right, you have your devices enrolled, you have your policies determined. Now you're just sitting back fielding alerts and reminders. There's not a lot of day-to-day legwork that needs to take place. We also have an extensive reporting functionality. So all of these reports here can be auto-generated, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. A lot of folks tell me, they have C-level folks that are, wanting to sink their teeth in a bit more, just get a handle on the environment. It's nice to be able to generate a report like this weekly and have it automatically sent to them. So extensive feedback, between the Alert Center up front and then the reporting section here. I'd imagine that the majority of you wouldn't be flying solo. You'd have some teammates helping you out. If you are flying solo, that's fine. It's easy enough. And the activity feed kind of loses some punch in that case. You'd be the only guy or gal making changes, administering the portal. For those that are working with at least one more person or a team, the activity feed's nice in the way that it reports at the admin level. The Alert Center tells you about your devices. The activity feed tells you about your admin. So easy enough to just add an administrator. We click on administrators. We hit add admin. Takes 10 seconds. The point is this serves as a checks and balances, right? You can see a new device was added, new app was added, rule violation here by Jimmy. Point being, not only a checks and balances, but it's a way to make sure that you're not duplicating efforts. So between the two, the Alert Center and the activity feed, it's just the best way to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on out there. Your visibility goes through the roof. And obviously it comes back to efficiency, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now you see devices, users, apps, and docs here. Same 4 categories in our Smart Search. So anytime you wanted to add one of these 4, all you'd have to do is hit the blue plus, just to show you this workflow. The general rule of thumb, folks, is anytime you're pushing an app, a doc, you're administering a policy, you're sending a message, anything, typically, 99.9% of the time, you can do so to a single device, a group of devices, or all devices. So it kind of goes back to that slide where Dan walked us through, marketing, finance, accounting. If you're pushing a new sales promotion or sales presentation, send it to your sales guys and gals. The new trends, the new projections, financially, obviously you want to send that to the bean counters. So the clients that I work with who really dive into groups, they really have the most success. I think it's the easiest to administer that way. And again, typically you can send things to a single device, a group of devices, or all devices. But just to show you how easy it is to add a doc, You would browse for your attachment, just like you were, adding one to an email. We can enter the new name of the file. We can restrict export, restrict cut, copy, and paste. Maybe it's sensitive, right? So we want to password protect that. So we're obviously always trying to save on expenses. Let's download it on Wi-Fi only. And then again, folks, who are we sending it to? One, a group, or all? You'd hit save, and then it would be in their document repository mere seconds later. Easy enough. If we go back to the home screen, so what you'll find, and again, if we had a one-off demo, if we did a free trial, what you'd realize is there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? There's more than one workflow to accomplish the same thing. Now, initially, that may seem to be labor-intensive, when in fact it's really about, the team at Champion, myself, our customer engineers here at IBM, will help you find the workflow that's most comfortable for you, and then obviously that's the one we want you to stick with. So, for instance, you could hover over devices, you could click on inventory, brings you to a list of all of your devices. Now, if you had more than 20, that gets a bit hairy, right? It's a bit cumbersome from my perspective. So again, I do suggest, utilizing groups. But in the case where somebody comes running and screaming into your office that they lost their device, it was stolen, we'll pick on my director here. We type in his username. We hit view on his iPad. And all of the information you see here auto-populates. Okay, you don't have to lift a finger. This auto-populates upon enrollment. Now, at a high level, it's nice to see who owns the device, what OS is it running. In this case, it's corporate-owned rather than BYOD. Then the workplace and security comes into play. And you've heard, Dan and I mention it a couple times, policy and compliance, right? That's the meat and potatoes of the portal itself. So policy is the law, and compliance is the police. You can very easily determine how you want the devices to be governed. There's no limit to the number of policies you can have. So you can have a few for iOS, a few for Android, a couple for BYOD, a couple for corporate, so on and so forth. There's absolutely no limit here. But you determine how you want the devices to be governed, and we go out, we scan the environment, we find the bad guys, right? So, we can see here that the device is enrolled, okay? Dan's in compliance based on the policies that are governing that device. He hasn't jailbroken or rooted. Obviously, the more green check marks you see, the better. Now, it looks like he might be chewing through a little bit too much data, so we'll talk about expense management here in just a few moments. And it looks like we might need to reconfigure some of his email settings. So now, this is a demo portal, right? So we try and set a couple of landmines in there, but all in all, not much to worry about. He's at least playing by the rules that you've set forth. Everything else is easily fixed. Now, under the Summary tab, we get to be more granular. Right now, maybe for BYOD, it's potentially too granular. The last thing you want to do is ruffle feathers or play Big Brother. On the BYOD side of things, you need to tread a little more lightly. People don't want to feel as though they're restricted. They want to be enabled with the tools they need throughout the day on the device that they choose, right? So this isn't perfect for everybody, but then again, we have healthcare clients where you can't get stringent enough, right? HIPAA compliance, and different industries are held to different regulations. So take this at a high level, but obviously, we kind of talked about security and compliance, the hardware and OS. We can provide location information, and this is just one way. So here's where you can get a breadcrumb trail of that device. Let's say you have field engineers, field reps, drivers. You can see where the device was yesterday, the last week, and then custom goes all the way up to 30 days. We can see what apps are installed, maybe more importantly, which apps you've distributed as an admin. We can see what docs have been downloaded, and then we have our secure browser. So, Dan made mention of this, and I think it's something worth harping on. First of all, we can disable the native browser and steer them towards the Master 360 secure browser. They wouldn't know the difference. It's built to mirror the native. And it's category-based URL filtering, right? And we can also allow exceptions. Now you can block and track, or block, track, and file websites. Again, category-based. Maybe you want to eliminate gambling, erotica, and social media, but you want to allow LinkedIn. Very easily done. We'll show you that once we dive into policies. But a great way to get that extra hold. You have data overages. Not on top of app management, let's restrict a few websites as well. Or, God forbid any of these devices are client-facing. Maybe it's a tablet out on a retail floor or with a driver. Whatever the case is, you can imagine where the secure browser would come into play. On the right side, we have our actions. Okay, so now picture Dan comes running and screaming into our office that he lost his phone. He lost it, he thinks it might be stolen. Well, with a click of a mouse, we can locate that device. Right now, we're downtown here in Philadelphia. We have the ugliest building down here. We're proud of it, though. Now, you can see here, it's not going to say, hey, you're on the 20th floor, you're all the way up, and it's on your desk, on the left side of the building. But he knows he left it at work, right? If it were a gas station, if it were his house, you know where to send them. So, some pretty powerful information there. Now, beyond that, we can also send a message to that device. All right, so maybe I'm naive here for thinking that a $50 reward gets it done, but call this number and we can meet up and exchange a couple dollars for the device. My clients actually tell me this is the best way to centrally broadcast as well. So again, you can send a message to one device, a group, or all devices. Hey, bad snowstorm coming, we're open up 2 hours late, whatever the case is. This is kind of one of those nice to haves rather than a need to have, but I'm sure there's an instance where you'd like to be able to reach out and touch somebody, or a group, or all. We can also buzz the device. Now, I'm not going to do this now, Dan. He would strangle me the next time he sees me. But if the phone was lost, if it were stolen, under the couch cushions, under the driver's seat, this is the best way to find it. It's the loudest, most annoying sound ever. If you have any problem end users, buzz their device at 3:34 a.m. and they'll straighten up for you. But you didn't hear that from me. Under the More tab, it gets even more granular, and this is where we try and amp up security, right? So again, picturing that lost or stolen device, maybe the BYOD and the end user went rogue, we can lock the device or reset the passcode, with a click of a mouse here. Then you have two different wipes. So wipe is a full wipe. It restores the device back to its factory settings. That's when you know that thing's not coming home. Okay to do as a last resort on the corporate side, never okay to do on a BYOD. It's a good way to wind up in the courtroom because you don't only wipe the enterprise data, but you get rid of the picture of grandma or the voicemail from the fiance, whatever the case is. It's not your information to wipe in that case. So selective wipe is a much more proactive and safe way to protect that information. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. Remember how we said that each and everything that you push down from the portal to the device is housed in that corporate container. Email, calendar, contacts, apps, docs, Wi-Fi settings, you name it. It's all housed in this corporate container, even on an end user owned device. So the next time they lose it, it gets stolen, they quit, they run away with your information, you can selectively wipe it, and it only strips that corporate container. Now the best part is maybe that good Samaritan calls you and returns the device. Maybe you buzzed it and it was just under the couch cushions. Selective wipe, whereas there's no coming back from full wipe, selective wipe is a fully revocable action. You can reinstall that corporate container as if it never left. Pretty cool stuff there. All but a necessity in the BYOD world. And then again, different workflows, right? We can change a policy or a rule set right from here. Of course, we can do it in the security tab, which we'll head to next. But you can do it from this screen as well, specific to this device. You can distribute an app or a doc. Easy enough. Now, the one thing I realized I forgot to mention was our threat management. Dan highlighted it as part of the presentation earlier. But this is a true differentiator. Again, to Dan's point, we are the only platform to have this baked into their current solution. In a nutshell, it's auto detection and auto remediation of malware on the device. As we move into and throughout 2016, this becomes a necessity as well, because you spend X amount on encryption, firewall, antivirus for your network in general. but people aren't going after Champion's network. They're going after Dan's phone and letting him walk them right in. Phishing, farming, spamming, they're more prevalent now than ever. You know, you can ask Target and Home Depot and Sony, you know, look, the cases are out there. Very inexpensive value add. It's an extra safety net. And again, you don't have to lift a finger. Auto detection, auto remediation. We scan the environment. If we find a bad app, if we find bad code, we get rid of it before it can hurt you.
And Adam, this is Dan. I read a very interesting article, and anybody that's out on the phone, if you do travel, if you've ever been into an airport, you know, you have those power stations, you plug in your phone to get some extra battery juice. Last year, at the end of last year, people had actually gone into airports and taking one of those small little, you know, Linux little handheld boxes, put it at the back end of those power stations with the whole idea of when you plugged your device in, it spread malware to your device. I never would have even thought of that, but they infected over 10 million devices throughout some airport simply by adding that little Linux box to the back end. And all you're trying to do is get power, and you infected your phone.
Right. Right, and Dan, I appreciate that. I think it goes to show that the thieves and hackers are getting smart as well. They're going to continue to find new ways into the device. You know, and look, I'm not proud to admit that I'm 30 years old and play Angry Birds, but when I do, you risk you know, hitting the screen at the wrong time. You hit a pop-up and it takes you to some advertisement, and God only knows what that's doing to the website. I'm sorry, to the device. So, you know, they're going to continuously find ways to get in there. It's nice to know that you have this continuous scan running in the background. And again, you know, a true differentiator. Gartner actually recognized that for us this past year as being the only group to have this baked into the current platform. All right, so I think we're ready to spend, you know, 10, 15 minutes in policies, and then I would say let's open it up to Q&A. So I really want you folks to get a feel for how user-friendly it is, you know, from this point on. The green check marks here, they're your default policies. They come preloaded into your portal, whether it's through free trial, whether it's through implementation. Myself, our customer engineers, will help you mold them, make them your own. You can start from scratch. In any case, it really is point and click. We'll just dive into an iOS here that seems to be pretty prevalent in the enterprise. And you'll have 4 categories here on the left. The top 2, I think, are the most important in terms of day-to-day legwork. And then it obviously only gets more granular from there. So let's start with the device itself. Once we hit edit, you know, it really just turns into checkboxes and drop-downs, right? Do you want a passcode on the device? Well, sure, that's a good frontline defense, you know, if you leave it at the gas station or it does get stolen. How many digits do we want that passcode to be? You know, 4 is pretty standard. For that same problem end user who were buzzing their device, you know, overnight, make it 16 digits. They'll love you for it. But very, very easily configured here. How often do we want it to turn over? 90 days is pretty standard as well. Again, you folks can read, but I wanted you to see it's just, you know, check boxes and drop downs. Restrictions from a high level. Again, it only gets more granular from here. You know, and then I'll just kind of speak to some of the standard use cases. Again, healthcare clients, we got to kill the camera, right? No camera in the facilities. We also don't want screen capture. And then, you know, not just specific to healthcare, but hey, you know what? Our guys and gals are playing too many games. They're killing our data. They're not being productive. Let's get rid of in-app purchases, multiplayer gaming. We can also kill YouTube. This is as simple as just reading through and either checking or unchecking the box, right? Let's kill the use of Safari if we are rolling out the Mass 360 secure browser, and so on and so forth. You can keep going through these tabs, folks, one by one, make your changes, and then as soon as you hit save and publish here in the top right, any device that's being governed by this policy, those changes take effect immediately. Now, we're in application compliance here. This is a big one for us because we always hear, hey, Adam, you know what? We need to push public or enterprise apps down to the device. Or, you know what? I'm sick of my guys and gals watching Netflix. Let's get rid of it. Is there any way you can kill that? Well, we can actually do both. So we'll start with the blacklist here. Unbelievably easy process here. So there's no limit to the number of apps you can have on this list or any list here. I usually just use 3 as an arbitrary number. The blacklist says, hey, we don't care what you're doing on these devices, but these are the 3 apps that you won't run. Type the name of the app, it goes out to the iTunes Store or the Google Play, and you click on it. So I usually like to get rid of the bandwidth hogs, the productivity killers. So we'll go Netflix, Hulu, and HBO Go, and we just build a three application blacklist in about 12 seconds. Right now, the whitelist is a little more granular. Not for everybody. Consider your options, BYOD and corporate, but it's the flip side of that coin. Hey, we don't care what you're doing on these devices. These are the only 3 apps you can run, right? So maybe they're line of business apps, and you folks know your business better than I do. But, you know, Gas Buddy for your drivers and so on and so forth. So if you're looking to just get rid of a few headaches, the blacklist is the play. And then we have other people that say, Adam, you know what? We need to lock these things down, man. We can't let them do anything. In that case, the whitelist is the best option. But I did want you to see the workflow there. It's just as simple as typing the app and then clicking on it once it populates.
Adam, do you find like the whitelist that people do that for like kiosk mode or something, where they have a device that maybe corporate owned and they just want 1 or 2 things running on it?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. So, you know, kiosk mode is you know, something that we can certainly handle. And for the folks who are unfamiliar, obviously it's, you know, picture just putting them in a sandbox. Hey, here are the toys you can play with, nothing else. Now, that really comes down to OS and the APIs that are released to us. At certain points, there's a limit on how many apps you can put in the kiosk mode. So in that case, Dan, you know, I like to roll out the whitelist because it's a little more free-flowing. And instead of, hey, let's get rid of these few apps, it's, no, let's get rid of everything except these few apps. So very easily done, kiosk mode and or a whitelist or blacklist. It's just an alternate workflow, whatever you think is best. And again, these are the things that we could work out through testing, right? We want you to get your hands dirty. We want you to enable both and see what you like more. Now, the top 2 are more about restrictions. The bottom one here, required apps, and I'm sure you can see where it's going. That's more about empowering and enabling the end user. So it takes the other look, if you will. We don't care what you're doing on the device. These are the 3 apps that you will have, right? So, you know, I don't know. I'm just grasping at straws here. Some sort of calendar app. I already used a calculator, but let's make sure that's on there. Again, easy enough to just type the app and click on it, and then you're done. So you can restrict with the top 2, or you can configure the required apps. All in all, the app management section is pretty robust here. ActiveSync, this is where we'll push down email settings. It's as easy as the domain name, the email address, and they can get their secure email within that encrypted container. You can restrict cut, copy, and paste. You can restrict forwarding of attachments. A ton of granularity here. Again, I do suggest it for everybody because there's so much precious information transmitted through email. Corporate, you know, it's important, but I think in BYOD world, it's a slam dunk. I mean, if you have a BYOD presence, you need a container, and that's all but definite at this point. So easy enough there. Trusteer is the auto detection and auto remediation of malware, right? So just like the secure browser, we can say, hey, you know, I want you to scan the environment. I want you to find all the bad code and bad apps except for these apps. You know, maybe you're aware of an app that has bad code and it's okay in your mind. I can't imagine adding too many exceptions here, but it's nice to know that you can. We can also push Wi-Fi settings down to the device, easy enough. But I also wanted to discuss the secure browser and expense management. I think we'll open it up to Q&A. And again, folks, keep in mind that we're only scratching the surface here, right? And again, through a one-off demo or a trial, we'll get a lot more targeted and direct towards your specific environment. But let's take a look at secure browser. So we hit view. And again, URL filtering based on categories, right? Do we want to allow cookies? Do we want to disable cut, copy, or copy and paste, excuse me? Let's get rid of downloads. And under the URL filterings, again, you can allow, you can block and track, or allow and track. You can disable by categories, but then you can have your exceptions as well. Now, I think LinkedIn is the best example here, because when you get rid of social networking, you think Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, people don't need that from 9 to 5. LinkedIn's a little different. I actually have it up and running each and every day in the background. So to be able to get rid of a whole category but then allow your exceptions, I think that's pretty powerful as well. A lot of folks say, well, what are the categories and why do you do categories? Well, we would allow you to do one-offs, that's fine, but I do think that you'd retire before you got done with how many gazillion websites. So, here are our categories. Scan through, you add what you like, you keep out what you don't, add your exceptions, and then you're done. Pretty cool stuff there as well. We'll go to expense management, and then Dan, I would say let's open it up to Q&A. So I don't want to speak for everybody. I don't want to say that everybody on the line has data overage problems with their carrier, but I would say that most do, or most have, right? You've had this headache in the past. Think about it this way. We play offense and defense. We're proactive and reactive. So up front with the proactive approach, through app management, when you set your whitelist or your blacklist and you get rid of Netflix, Facebook, Hulu, even if that's all you did, app management and secure browser, you would get rid of so much of that problem, right? Because if you take away the temptation, then people actually might focus on work a bit more. We actually like to kill the ant with the hammer. So not only do we offer app management and a secure browser, but we send your visibility through the roof. Now, we're platinum level partners with Verizon. We're also actually newly partnered with AT&T. I've been told by both parties that this expense management piece is much more robust than what they offer. So the proof is in the pudding. We get that. But think about it this way. Again, you've whitelisted or blacklisted your apps. You've gotten rid of some websites. Now it's all about increasing visibility. So at the first threshold here, let's set it to 50%. We just want to alert for right now, right? And we actually don't even want to bother you guys and gals as admins. We just want to alert the end user. Hey, watch yourself. You're at 50%. And this is a customizable message. We've seen some pretty colorful stuff there over the years, as you can imagine. Second one, let's change to 70%. And we'll stay with an alert, but now we do want to bring the admins in, right? So we'll put it on your radar as well. You can also add emails, maybe their manager, their director, whatever's clever in that regard. But at least now you have visibility that XYZ is at 70%. Again, customizable. The next one's where it gets pretty cool. So we don't want to let it get to 110. We'll go to 90 here, and we're done playing Mr. Nice Guy. We're not alerting anymore. We're going to change policy. Now, remember how I said there's no limit to the number of policies you can have in the portal? So I would take an extra 3 minutes and build an ultra stringent policy for this specific use case. When you get to 90%, we're changing your policy to, and I'll just pick one. This is the demo portal. But we're going to change your policy to ultra lockdown mode. Now you can't go to that app that we allowed you to do the rest of the month. You can't go to the website. You take away their ability to chew through data the way they have, and obviously productivity goes through the roof, and those costs come down, right? So between app management and secure browser up front, and then expense management on the back end, we've seen 70, 80, 90% of monthly overages dissipate over time. So that's an instance where Mass 360 would pay for itself and then some. At that point, Dan, again, I think from a high-level walkthrough, that covered a lot. I'd like to ask folks if they have questions based on what we've discussed today. Maybe is there something they were hoping to see that we didn't get to? I think we should open the floor here.
Yeah, so we had one question someone typed in a while ago, and I can see as you moved around there, Adam, where this applies, right? You kept talking about policies and so forth to groups. How are groups created? I know the answer, but let you do it So is it manual groups? How can you leverage maybe groups that already exist in their environment today? How do you target systems by group?
Right, right. So all we did was, hover over devices, users, we hit groups. You can add a device group here. Then we also integrate with Active Directory, right? So we have what's called our cloud extender. Very small executable. It's about 15, 16 meg these days. Takes about 20 minutes to run. It's a free service. It sits on a virtual machine, and it ties into Active Directory. It allows you to leverage any pre-existing groups you have there, carry them right over into the portal. You can now leverage your AD credentials as part of a bulk enrollment. And maybe the best use case, for the folks on the line that do have a BYOD environment, it takes the guesswork out of it. It clears up the gray area. It will give you an exact head count into the number of devices and or users that are accessing the network. So I know I went off on a tangent there. Dan, it's easy enough to create a group right in the portal, but we can also carry over anything they have predetermined in AD.
And I like that. So again, just as a rollout policy, because folks, might have a very well mature or started already in their Active Directory in their groups. And we've used that for rollout as well, right? So just the same way you were talking about is creating different policies. It's, okay, hey, we're going to do a little lockdown test, right? So I'm going to apply this policy to only the IT folks that are in this OU, for example, the AD group, right? So it lets you control that without having to always go back to this portal, which is easy enough to use, but I can start driving some of that just by my Active Directory group membership. So you get very creative there. So another question someone threw out there is there any type of self-service portal or self-service capabilities for end users with their devices?
You know what? That's a good question. There is. I'm just not as familiar with it, right? And I just need to be candid. That would be a question a little more suited for our engineers. But I know you can set up a hierarchy portal. And within that, you keep in mind, you can also add administrators. Maybe you want to add, the management or the directors within each team or department, to where maybe the end user couldn't go in there and administer changes, but their manager could. So not the most technical answer, and I understand that. But whoever asked that, if they'd like to connect one-off, I'd be happy to provide more information and get that squared away.
Okay, and that's fair, because I know, and again, I've seen it too, where you can enable users, for example, hey, you can't change policy, but, let's take the example you use, hey, Dan lost his phone, I just traveled, I don't know where I left it, being able to log into that self portal, and all I can see is my smart device, whether it's an iPad, iPhone, or whatever, and I can go in and see where it is, right? So I can't affect policy, but I might be, oh, look, I did leave it in my car. At least I know it's safe, right? So that capability is there, right? Another question someone had just about, I think because it was up on your screen, an example of possible geofencing, and what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's huge for BYOD, right? Because, again, that slippery slope is, hey, we want you to, hey, you want to use a different device, we get it. We want you to be happy. I think if you use an Android, you'll be more efficient if that's your preference. Or if you want to go with the iPhone, just do it. So the benefits to BYOD are limitless. The problems are you're opening yourself up to security issues, and you're potentially ruffling feathers by trying to do something about it. So the geofence is that perfect marriage of, hey, when you're here, you play by our rules. When you're not, we don't care what you do on the phone. So there's no, people always ask us, can we timestamp it? From 9 to 5, can they play by our rules? It's not timestamped, but it is geolocated. So you set the perimeter around your location or your office. Could be 1/10 of a mile, 2/10, a half mile, whatever you like. You set the perimeter. When they drive into work or they take the train, they cross over that perimeter. They play by your rules. So maybe Netflix, Facebook, Twitter, they can't use them while they're at the office. But when they're driving home, when they're sitting in traffic, when they're sitting on the couch at night, when they're playing with the kids, who are you to say that they can't utilize those resources then? So the geofence is a way to give BYOD a slightly more corporate feel, without playing bad guy 24/7. I think that's fair enough to say, hey, use the device that you want. While you're here, you play by our rules, and then while you're at home, we don't care what you do.
Yeah, and I've seen that policy as well, which I liked. Is take a perfect example. You had mentioned a hospital. So when I get on hospital grounds or close to it, maybe you're doing something as simple as disabling the camera, right? Because that's a requirement under HIPAA. But if you leave that area, well, your camera's back on, right? It's your personal device. So excellent example there. Do we have any more questions? Those are the 3 questions that I saw in the chat. I will add one other thing, and again, just knowing different mobility solutions and so forth. One of the other features, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Mod 360 is the only one that still does that, is, yeah, you can remove selectively wiping this, but to me, it was the only one that had that time-bound feature, right, for documentation, so that if you put out sensitive data, whether the device was still enrolled or not, you can put a timer on those documents, correct, to have them automatically get deleted in X days or whatever you determined that you wanted?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the coolest features. I call it the Inspector Gadget feature. You can set the message to self-destruct essentially, right? So maybe it's ultra sensitive. You only want it lingering out there for a couple days. You can very easily get rid of it.
Okay, and there's no other questions that I see, but I'm going to go and just add a couple comments as well. Again, from a mobility standpoint, Adam scratched the surface. Hopefully you can see that. There's a lot of areas we can dive in deeper if anybody had more interest. But one of the other reasons of why would you choose Mod 360 over other solutions? Again, if we go back to that initial page where we saw that big screen, right, it's how does this fit to the rest of your puzzle? We saw, for example, that malware capability. It's the only solution that has that. Well, because IBM kind of added that in there. When we talk about your overall security, that integration into your SIM, right? That security tool that's looking at all your logs and telling you where your vulnerabilities are if you don't know what a SIM is. We have direct integration with QRadar, Gartner's #1 piece from IBM. And also, we talked a lot about true mobility devices here, your smartphones, your tablets, but also in any organization, you have your servers, your desktops, your laptops, and how do you manage all those endpoints? And again, there's a direct integration between the Mod 360 product and the Big Fix endpoint management system. So I could be inside there and see every device in my organization, from the server class to the desktop to the laptop to my true mobility devices, and be able to manage and see them from a single pane of glass. And again, to me, that integration piece, when I step back and say, hey, we got mobility, we get that, this is great stuff, but how does this fit to the rest of my picture? I believe IBM simply leads the field there with that integration from that big picture scenario.
Absolutely, absolutely, Dan, and I appreciate that. And that's really what it did for us in 2013. When we were still FiberLink, and IBM called us, it did a lot to validate and vindicate us, right? This little old mom and pop cloud offering gets acquired by one of the biggest companies out there, and IBM realized they wanted to get into the space. It was exploding. A lot of times it's easier to buy it than build it, right? So they did their homework for a year. They were looking for security and ease of use, and they called us first. So I did want to kind of leave with this. It's something that I typically show in my normal one-on-one demo, because I think it's important to educate in terms of what's out there, what the folks are saying about us. I'm a consumer as well. I like consumer reviews. So I understand it's atypical. I always tell people, hey, you want to look at Mass 360, AirWatch, and Mobile Iron. They're typically the big 3. They're the 3 names you'll hear the most. This is from Gartner's 2015 Critical Capabilities Report, and you can see us at the top of the stack on both SaaS deployments and unified endpoint management. So best-in-class cloud. I think as people are making a bigger and bigger push to the cloud, it's nice to have the experience that we do here, whereas everybody else is kind of just spinning up their cloud offering now and growing through those growing pains. You can see here praise for ease of use and ease of deployment, and then being praised for the only group with integrated threat management. I'll kind of leave with this just to round that out. Forrester and Infotech, they kind of round out the holy trinity of IT research, right? This is Forrester's WAVE report from Q4 2015. It's actually the most recent. It was just released in December. You can see IBM all the way top right there. ranking highest in 20 out of 27 categories. Infotech backs it up with a little more standardized, quadrant approach. Obviously, you want to be top right. There's always going to be a couple people in our neighborhood, but not necessarily on the same street. So, clean sweep. Gartner, Forrester, and Infotech all have us positioned as #1. And for those folks who have a tough CFO or a tough controller, offering the most functionality for the price. So we're going to put some value behind it as well. Dan, I know that wasn't in the playbook today, but I think it's important to see, what the folks are saying about us here. So.
No, absolutely.
No other...
I love. Yeah, no, absolutely. Those were great indicators to add in there. And lastly, just because again you did mention the SaaS and for mobility management, to me, in the cloud is the easiest way to go. But for any organization that may be large and wants to bring it in-house, you can do this solution as an on-premise solution as well. Correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's typically reserved for our larger clients, but it is available, and that's kind of where we would want to discuss one-offs, right? Because the stigma is, hey, AirWatch and Mobile Iron, they were born on-prem, we were born in the cloud, and now we're both starting to kind of dip our toes in each other's pools, right? It's spy versus spy. Now we have an on-prem offering and they have cloud offerings. So whatever your preference is, we can certainly speak to that. But we're finding that, whereas our cloud is private, FISMA, and FedRAMP certified, it hasn't gone down once in 12 years. We're finding that they're going through the growing pains now of a third-party cloud. The certifications aren't there. It goes down once a quarter. Those are the things that are going to slow you down in the end. So, certainly happy to provide more information whenever the time is right. But I do hope this session was beneficial for those that did join us.
I appreciate it, Adam, here at Champion. We appreciate your time today. Thank everybody for joining in today. If you have any questions, please let us know, and we will try to publish this webinar out on the webpage. So thank you, everybody, for attending.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.